For people challenging injustice and inequality, the example of Martin Luther King Jr. remains a critical reference and source of inspiration. One illustration of that will happen May 15th at an event focused on a turning point for the civil rights movement, the Montgomery bus boycott of the 1950s, but also on King's legacy in Boston. The event's being presented by the Boston Mountaintop Committee. We'd like to welcome its creator and founder, Dr. Kevin C. Peterson. Thank you very much for being with us, Kevin.
Thank you for being here, Chris. It's always a pleasure.
Kevin, we're still learning new things about history here. And the shorthand a lot of us got to know early on was about Rosa Parks wanting to sit at random on a bus when she was tired. But talk about the importance of that right, because this wasn't just about a seat on a bus. This was about a larger structural phenomenon.
That's exactly right. Rosa Parks was pushing up against what in Montgomery at the time was structural racism, systemic racism. So her sitting in a seat that was not assigned to her, that was in fact assigned to whites under an apartheid regime, so to speak, wasn't for her to take, but she took it in defiance of the law and in the greater interest of engaging not only Montgomery, but the country in a conversation about racial reckoning. In 2021, we still engage in this contest or this contentation around racial reckoning. Rosa Parks is long gone, but her spirit remains. And so we come to this reading on May 15th in Boston on the Boston City Hall Plaza, not only to memorialize Rosa Parks and that majestic struggle in Montgomery 66 years ago, but we also seek to memorialize the 65th anniversary of the legal ruling of the Montgomery boycott. Those protesters engaged in the struggle for more than 300 days into 1956. The boycott started in 1955. 65 years later, we're looking back in order to look forward in Boston. There are structural signs and evidences of racism abounding in the city. Whether we talk about the disparities around healthcare or education or income inequality, we still have a long way to go.
When I look at that speech that King gave about the boycott, and he was sort of rallying people to stick with it and support it, to me, it's not so much even the speech itself as the strategy and the vision that went on around the boycott itself.
Yeah, it was about pooling the African-American community, and then beyond that, the white liberal community together in an effort to really state that we are a nation that is supposed to be unified under the rubric of democracy. That we are a country that is supposed to move beyond race, despite what the initial writings of the Constitution said. We are a nation, or purport to be a nation that's diverse and that's united. What Dr. King was doing as the newly minted leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association was to expound upon those themes of liberty and justice that he had called from his study at Boston University, in particular, the Divinity School, the School of Theology here in Boston. He called and cultivated those themes right here in Boston. And as he was continuing or finishing his dissertation from Boston at Boston University, he was in Montgomery, where he was drafted into this movement. And he used these wonderful themes that resonate, as I mentioned, from the founding fathers, but he also engaged in some of the philosophical and theological themes he encountered and brought into his thinking at Boston University. Themes such as the personalism of Professor Brightman, and many, many others. So this event pulls upon King's development and maturation as a student and as a young minister in Boston, in order for us to address issues that are current in Boston that, quite frankly, still need tending to.
One of the other things the boycott did is is that the other side responded as well, and it sort of put more of its cards on the table. They did that with legal action. They got King convicted of conspiracy, but also, there was the violent response to the boycott too.
Yes, King's home was bombed. Ralph Abernathy, his so-called co-conspirator throughout the civil rights movement, who got into good trouble with Dr. King, his home was bombed. In every civil rights campaign, every major one, we see both legal and an extra legal violent response from the white superstructure, as it were. That began in Montgomery, and we can only be thankful for the bravery and the courage expressed by those who were known, Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy and Rosa Parks and the attorney Fred Gray. We can be thankful for them, but there were thousands, tens of thousands of other foot soldiers who braved the elements and braved the responses, the violent responses from the white superstructure in order to make democracy new again. So we at New Democracy Coalition argue for racial equity and argue for the point that we need to address the issue of achieving or making it to the mountaintop. We're following in a wonderful tradition that was made by those foot soldiers, known and unknown, in Montgomery 65 years ago.
Plus the women's committee that was involved in this boycott even before King was enlisted.
Absolutely. We who read history closely, as you do, Chris, know that if it were not for the women's committee making the mimeograph copies of the flyers that inaugurated that movement within 2 days of Dr. King, of Rosa Parks being arrested, the city was galvanized and mobilized, and it would not have been it would not have happened if it were not been for the behind the scenes incredible work of women who stepped to the front and provided the backbone, the skeleton to the civil rights movement. We would not be where we are as a nation, as a democracy, as advanced as we are as in terms of other democracies. We wouldn't be here if it were not for Black women in Montgomery, those who inaugurated the modern civil rights movement and renewed our democracy.
I want to have you talk a little bit about the event on the 15th. This is going to be outdoors, so I guess in person, but with some distance?
Yes, we are designing a COVID-friendly event. The protocols and precautions are being relaxed a bit by the CDC nationally and even by Governor Baker, but we are requiring masks. We will have, we've been, 1,000 masks have been donated. We don't expect that many people, but we'll have 1,000 masks on hand. We'll have Purell and other sanitizers of brand name available. We'll have screenings over our microphones. We want to be safe, but we also want to come together after this long night of COVID, the COVID-19 sequestration in Boston. We're looking for an opportunity to come together. We're standing 6 feet apart, but we're joining in our hearts, in our minds, and in spirit over the words of Dr. King. So we want to invite everyone listening to this this broadcast to join us. May 15th, noon, Boston City Hall Plaza. We've invited the mayor. The governor will be participating in some way, Governor Baker. City councilors will be available. And Chris, we invite you to come. We invite everybody. Our youngest reader is an 8th grader Our oldest reader will be in, I think she's in her late 80s. So we are calling all to join us on this fourth annual MLK Reading Event, celebrating the mountaintop.
And Kevin, finally, where people can get some more information? You got a website or a social media page?
Well, we're just asking folks to directly contact us by emailing the New Democracy Coalition at gmail.com. The New Democracy Coalition at gmail.com. That'll come directly to us and we'll plug you in. We're still looking for a few more readers, but we're also inviting all of Boston and Metro Boston to come join us. We have special gifts that will recognize every single visitor. Thank you for having us, Chris, and we look forward to doing this on May 15th, but beyond also.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the invitation and the history.
Thank you.
It was Kevin Peterson from the Boston Mountaintop Committee. We'll have more news in just a moment.